Good morning, good afternoon in Europe, and good evening in Asia, and good very, very early morning if you're one of the brave people on the West Coast of the US that's joining us for this Humanized Growth Series conversation this week with Diego Scotti. My name is Mark de Swan-Arons. I'm one of the founders of the Institute for Real Growth, and we'll be talking about a whole broad range of topics that are about multi-stakeholder growth, humanized growth, and basically what it's like to take a marketing organization and take the broader organization to growth beyond the bottom line. This morning, I'd like to say a special welcome to Diego Scotti. Diego, good morning. Where are you and how are you?
Good morning, Mark. It's really a big pleasure to be here. For the ones that maybe don't know, you were one of the first people that I spoke to when I joined Verizon now almost 6 years ago. And I know that probably you don't want me to talk about this, but one of the first things that Mark did for me at that moment was to suggest that I created what he called a challenger board, a group of other CMOs that their only job was to basically criticize and critique everything that I wanted to do at Verizon and help me become the best CMO that I could be for this company. And I tell you, I know that you know this, Mark, but I wanted to say it publicly. I am convinced that that was one of the things that really set me up for success coming into the company. So if you're thinking you're coming into a new job, having your own challenger board in any way, shape, or form, I think it's from the get-go, it's a great learning and experience. So there you go. I am in Long Island, so I'm close to New York City, but we've been here with my family since the beginning of the pandemic. Traveling a little bit, but not too much. And how am I? Listen, I'm really excited about being here today. It's been a really exciting year so far for all of us here at Verizon. And I tell you, one of the most amazing things, or the silver linings of this period, has been really being with my family so much time. I see my kids, my wife every day. With our relationship has transformed in the last year to something that I it was difficult to imagine that could happen, but it's been really amazing. And I tell you, although it gets hard sometimes to be like 9 hours, 10 hours in front of this screen, I'm sleeping better than ever. I'm exercising more consistently than ever. So in a way, although I miss being with my team and being in the office, the quality of life has also gone up. So it's kind of like probably the answer of balance that we need to achieve after this is kind of like the biggest learning for me.
Well, that's fantastic to hear. As you may see, I know that you've attended some of the other sessions. My background is different. We're trying something new. I'm in a hotel that I think was supposed to open just before COVID. And the poor owners apparently financially survived. It's spanking new. It's the Rockaway. It is on the Rockaways by JFK. And it's been really nicely done. And we're going to do a few conversations from here today. But they are the internal meetings. What's special today is our conversation, Diego. And thank you for saying that about the Challenger Board. It's very apropos because we literally hit send on a newsletter yesterday that as the Institute for Real Growth, after 2 years, we felt we were being successful. The evaluations tell us so. But we also felt we needed to reinvent and actually think about the next generation of leaders. So we literally announced yesterday the Institute for Real Growth Challenger Board. And they are leaders with 10 years marketing experience from every continent in the world. We had a first meeting last week to just get to know each other, to give them license to really kick the tires and tell us what we're doing wrong and tell us where to go next. And so indeed, it is a mechanism that I highly respect and intend to learn from. But today's about you. I want to just tell the viewers and readers a little bit, because we're also transcribing this, about Diego. Diego joined Amex in 1999 in Miami. and really worked his way up the East Coast at a stint at Condé Nast and J. Crew. And then in 2014 was appointed as the first cross-business CMO for Verizon. Now, I said 2014, which already proves that he is over almost triple the average tenure of a chief marketing officer. Greg Welsh would tell us that. But we're going to talk about that journey, and we're going to talk and learn from you. But as you sort of touched upon some COVID learning, before we get into your journey at Verizon, I wanted to just ask you to step back and look at the marketing organization at the Verizon organization. What has changed over the last year and a half?
I would say this happened at a very interesting time in my mind, because we had a new CEO that just came to the helm of the company, 2 years ago, and changed. So this kind of like happened right at the beginning, right at a moment in which we were already making the transformation into the new era of 5G. So it kind of like got in a moment in which a lot of things, thank God, were already underway in terms of the way we wanted to run the company under the new CEO. And I would say that everything that we were already doing just got accelerated. Number one, and I'm talking about the focus on the employees as one of the key four stakeholders that we really needed to transform. Not only what we're doing for customers and for shareholders, but then adding society, that was a stakeholder that when the new CEO came in, believe it or not, it became a much more important area for Verizon, as officially named it as one of our four stakeholders. So everything started to accelerate it, and I think culturally we were already doing a lot of work around the transformation of the culture of the company to become a lot more agile, a lot more innovative, a lot more transparent, a lot more about collaboration, a lot more like bottoms up. And what this generated was the opportunity to accelerate all of that. And I tell you, for me, the biggest learning of all of this, and I know that I'm gonna sound a little bit I think esoteric about all of this, but it's been really the notion of what human beings are capable of when you're faced with the need to adapt, to transform, to do things differently, and to innovate is remarkable. If you would have told me, the marketing team and creative teams would be collaborating and doing amazing work without being on the same office, I would have said that I wouldn't believe that would be possible. And I would be very against that. In fact, I always remember, before the pandemic, for God's sake, we were doing meetings with people on the phone, like conference calls, because that was kind of like the way we did it, So being able to know like what we're capable, and then being able to understand how do you take all those learnings and then you evolve. That to me is a tremendous privilege to be in management, to be in a leadership position, to really, and I'm not saying that it's not complex, but taking all of these inputs and figure out how do you drive the path forward. I don't know, for me, is the funnest part of my job, even when you don't have all the answers.
No, that's very interesting to hear. So you talked about the ability of people to change under crisis circumstances, really. And I wonder, we discuss in our program, and most of our listeners are leaders themselves in marketing and other growth functions. We often talk about the role of purpose as a guiding light in such transitions. Let me ask you first about you personally. Are you clear on your purpose? And do you mind sharing it?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I want to share it. And I tell you, for me, my personal purpose has been a process. And one of the things that I always say to people is like, listen, if you're not so clear about what your purpose is, or if you're not totally there yet, and you have some parts of it, or at least, don't stress, because I think it's almost like a process that you need to go through to understand better yourself, understand better your strengths. And some people are so clear about their purpose from day one that it's amazing. Some people are not. I wasn't totally clear about my purpose from the beginning. It took me some time to really understand what was important to me, but also connected to the value that I can bring to the world, you know.
Yeah.
And my purpose is really very, very simple in a way, but it's related to connection, and connection. And it has nothing to do with Verizon. But my point is connecting people to opportunity, and that always have been my something that when I look back, even from very, very young age, and being a community organizer, you know, in my public, you know, school down in Argentina, you know, trying to fix things that didn't work. I'm always in this. My emphasis is always, how do I bring people together to do things that need to be done? It could be a groups in the company, organizations. Tomorrow we're doing this big special Vax Live to drive, you know, awareness on vaccination and vaccine equity with the Global Citizen. And I said, but the Ad Council that I'm very involved with and Global Citizen need to be working together. So we put them both together to kind of like the idea, you know me, in terms of the collaboration to drive, bringing people together to collaborate, to drive impact, is what gives me so much joy, you know, and it really fills me. And then I can see the impact that, because I'm good at it, you know, I kind of like, that's my emphasis. I could see the value that adds, which in a way is really what I think it retrofits, if you would, it creates a virtuous cycle in terms of making your purpose even more meaningful to you when you can see the impact that it creates, you know.
Connecting. So COVID hits, and you're head of marketing in a business with distinct businesses, and we'll talk a little about how that came to be and how you built that marketing function. But now COVID struck. What were the big changes that actually needed to happen, and how did you connect?
Well, Verizon is a company that, I tell you, one of the things that we are most proud, and I'm very proud of Verizon as an organization, is that we have this thing that says, you know, we always run to a crisis, you know, and it's just really remarkable that no matter the crisis that happens anywhere in which we do business, it's almost like the different groups in the company, all of the differences that you might have, and everything disappears, and the focus becomes on how do we address that crisis, how do we help the four stakeholders, so the galvanizing power of the company in terms of crisis is already something very innate for the company. But listen, even with that, this was a crisis that none of us had a book that we can go to and say, okay, how do we deal with this? So a lot was about instinct. But I tell you, as I think I mentioned at the beginning, first of all, I never imagined that having a purpose that for us is creating the networks that move the world forward. Creating the networks that move the world forward. That's the purpose of the company. I never thought that having that purpose would have been so helpful, so galvanizing, so helpful for creating focus when COVID hit, because it really gave us a tremendous sense of clarity around, like, well, listen, if we are the ones that create the networks that move the world forward, that means that we need to, first of all, figure it out. How do we support our four stakeholders? Then it became very clear that it wasn't only about just talking. At the beginning, remember, everybody was saying, we're there for you, we're going to support you. For us, it was very, very important that this wasn't about words. This was about action. And that was a critical point, because we moved really, really fast. We were the first company in the country to have a TV commercial saying what we were doing for our customers, for our employees, and also for some of the groups in society that needed support immediately. We went and we said, okay, what are those groups? Kids that need to continue to study, first responders or workers that are in the front lines that need not only connection, but they also need to eat. You know, there was like try to, and then our employees. that on this, obviously the safety and security of our employees was paramount. So I tell you that there were some of the purpose, the principle about action, no words, and then creating these collaborations to make things happen internally and externally. All of a sudden, they became like really, really important galvanizing principles, if you would, for acting. And what I always say that I think is something that we shouldn't take for granted is the importance of leadership during these times. We instituted two things as a management team that were, I think, in my opinion, really critical for success. Number one, we have an 8 o'clock meeting every day, including weekends, in which our CEO and his 8 direct reports, we will get together and go through the same agenda every single day. What we're doing for employees, what we're doing for customers, what we're doing for shareholders, what we're doing for society. And everybody will come, everybody will, the level of connection that created was very critical. And then the other thing is, that was at 8 o'clock, and then at noon, we had what we call a Up to Speed, which is our, I would call it like our internal news program. That is a webcast that runs every day, and we're still doing it at 12 o'clock for half an hour to talk to our employees directly. For the first 2 or 3 months, our CEO was there every day, talking to the employees, saying, discussing what we were doing, taking questions. Remember, at the beginning, there was a lot of uncertainty. People wanted to really hear from leaders. And now, looking back, maybe we kind of like forget about how important that was, but it really changed the way that's one of my examples of how it accelerated a lot of the things that we were doing already, and the connection with our employees significantly increased from that perspective. And to the point that I think one of the great things that I think the team did, which I thought it was a great idea, Up to Speed not only became something that we broadcasted internally, but Up to Speed runs also in Twitter, in Facebook, in social media platforms. So then everybody else outside of the company could see what Verizon was doing inside the company. So in a way, when you think about modern marketing, that is something that I know that for some companies that might look like, oh my God, that's kind of like, I don't even know how my management would even begin to understand or be happy or comfortable with that notion. But in this day and age, that became, and especially during this time, that became one of the key pillars of our marketing, that people could see how Verizon was behaving internally and with all of the stakeholders. So it was really, really, really helpful and galvanizing force.
Well, I'm gonna try and unpack that a little, because there's so many leaders listening that undoubtedly want to learn from this, Diego. And I want to connect some things that you said, beginning with the connecting role itself. And now you're talking about these multiple stakeholders. You said the CEO, the new CEO, brought an emphasized focus on the other stakeholders. Can you talk a little bit about, indeed, how the company distinguishes between those stakeholders, and how that additional focus on additional stakeholders, how that's changed the discussions internally?
Yeah, and this is again to Hans Vestberg is our CEO, and to his credit, he was very, very key, very clear since the beginning that all 4 stakeholders are equally important. And and you always had but shareholders are probably more important. No, customers, because they pay the bills, and not employees, because if we don't have happy employees, we can't have good customers. And that's the point. They're all equally important. So we created something that it was something that helped us enormously in that process, which was what we call the balanced scorecard. And the balanced scorecard has the 4 stakeholder groups, and we agreed on a set of metrics for the 4 stakeholders. And that became the way we measure not only success, but also we hold ourselves accountable, and the way we also manage compensation for the leadership of the company. And like in any corporation, in any organization, if you can measure it, you can drive change. So you need to just make sure that you get to the right measurements and incentives. and then you drive the change, and so that was extremely helpful in terms of balancing the four stakeholders.
Huh. And I mean, can you give an example of where by just adding new stakeholders to your perspective, actually it led to different conversations and different decisions, new actions?
Yeah, I mean, a great example is, in the context of COVID, is the issue of the digital divide. And for example, that for us is very, very important, very relevant for these days, very important and relevant for the work that we do in the company. But for us was, yes, important, but something that a few years ago, it was more something that the people on public policy will talk a lot about, that related to relationships with the administration of the time or the moment, and then the work that we might do in philanthropy, right? But if you say, no, this is one of the issues that are important for our balanced scorecard for the company, then what that means is that, especially when you talk about societal issues, this is not about philanthropy or public policy. It's about the strategy of the company. So I'm using that as an example because what this generated is the opportunity for us to talk about the digital divide, not only in the context of what we do for philanthropy, but in the context we design our network strategy to support or invest in rural communities. In a lot of cases might be through philanthropy, but in a lot of cases might be through unlocking business opportunities with the right business models to serve those communities. Partnerships that we would do on the business side to provide the right level of connectivity with the right business models for school districts, for example, can change the conversation. And what I think is, going back to your point about connection, what it does is, in my mind, what it did for us is to start making sure that the conversations happen in a holistic way. That is not like my CSR team running on one direction doing something, the enterprise or business group creating isolated deals, and public policy doing something else. It forces the conversation to be galvanized. And when we talk about society as a key stakeholder as well, I'm a strong believer on this. Society as a stakeholder is not what you do in your spare time or with philanthropy. It has to be part of your strategy. When you make society part of a strategy, the right conversations happen because you start thinking about sustainability, if it's out, social justice issues. You start thinking about, in our case, digital divide, which are critical to the way we succeed or not as a company. And that is a fundamental, I think, mindset change in the way companies need to think about their role in the world, the relationship to their purpose, and then how they connect strategy with purpose. I mean, you remember when we started with this, and you started even before me on talking about purpose, and not because you're older. Actually, I think you're younger than me, but because you started earlier, to your credit. Talking about purpose and all that, it was still a little bit of like, purpose was this thing about, oh yeah, it's kind of like I get it, it's nice, but let me continue with the business side, and then I'll come back to it. And now we live in a world in which the reason why purpose is important is because, especially for big companies, that they are in the eye of the storm of all of this transformation that is happening in society, and you are demanded by society to participate, stand up for the things that you believe, to drive your strategic moves with society in mind. So that's why, to me, it's so interesting to see that now it's not a choice anymore. Like you can get away not to have a purpose. It's absolutely indispensable.
Well, Diego, what's so impressive about that is that I think I know Verizon a little bit as a company. You mentioned the machine that it is. It runs to a crisis. And it sounds like with your balanced scorecard for all stakeholders at the top, this is now truly ingrained. I want to go back 6 years because I know your journey a little bit, and I know that it will be so teaching for so many of the leaders in this webinar that are listening, that are thinking about their role in driving change. And you stepped into an organization that had marketing at the divisional level, but not at the corporate level. And even before you started, I remember you shared that, I don't know if it was the job application process or just the getting ready to start, you were driving a roadmap for change with the CEO, a roadmap to create marketing for the first time at corporate level. And so I want to start there. You've now tried that for 6 years. I mean, obviously you have a much longer marketing career, but how did that go? How did you negotiate and educate the leadership of the company on the role of marketing?
Well, I tell you, it's interesting that you started where you started with the question, because I sometimes forget, and I think sometimes we forget how even before you get offered a role or you start a role, how important it is to have a very strong and clear point of view in terms of how would you run that function, or how would you do your job? What's your vision for the job? So, since we're talking to a lot of people in this call, I tell you, it's even to this day when I'm hiring for very senior roles, when I ask, like, what is the vision for the role, and people answer a version of, well, listen, it's difficult because I don't know the company very well, or I don't really know the organization very well, which to me is always the kind of like not a good sign, because it's kind of like, well, maybe you need to do a little bit more homework, and also you need to have a little bit more of imagination. But listen, you're not going to hit it 100%, but to me, it's always the 80-20. And that's how we started with this. I said to the CEO, listen, I want to put together what it would be my plan to get this function, the brand, my vision for the sector and our place in it, and how would I do the job. I want to put it in a piece of paper, and I want to come and talk to you about it. And I said, I'm not going to hit it everything, because obviously you don't know everything, but if I hit it 70-80%, listen, that would be a perfect thing for you. Because part of my when he called me, and this was the previous CEO, I was like, listen, I'm this kind of marketer, this kind of person, I would do this thing. So I wanted him to understand what he was buying as well with getting me, because I said, like, just want to make sure that we're aligned. It's like, are you sure you want me as the CMO? Anyway, so it was really helpful to align on that. And then I think what he created with the CEO, but I think this applies to any person that is your boss or your leader, which is the clarity of the expectations and what do you need from them. And I tell you, as a leader, sometimes I'm not clear about what my people need from me to help them be successful. But when somebody tells me, here's what I need, here's what I need your help, it becomes a really a liberating thing for me, because as a problem solver, sometimes leaders will like, where are you going to put your energy? Oh, I know now. Now, going to back to the specific point about the CMO. And I've been very fortunate in my career, and I've been very fortunate at Verizon in terms of having leaders. I don't think anybody can do anything on their own, and I've been very fortunate of having, since I've been here, 2 CEOs that I would have not been able to do what I did without their support. I think that's period. Let me say, for good that we are, and the great team that we have, without their support, we wouldn't be able to do it. But support doesn't mean protection or cuddling, or I don't mean that kind of support. I mean that they were engaged with the vision, that they were in agreement with the vision, that they help us drive that vision, and that we were also accountable to the success of their strategy or their vision to be a CEO of the company. And I truly I couldn't emphasize that more, in the sense of, like, if between the CEO and the CMO there's no and I'm not even talking about personality or chemistry, which obviously it helps a lot, but if there's no alignment in terms of what's important, what's the focus, how do we measure success, what success look like, and then being relentless about maintaining that relationship, is very hard. It's very hard, and that's why I think the tenures of CMOs are also so short. So for us in marketing, we created a very clear plan of what we wanted to do. And my plan was a 5-year plan. Now we're getting to the end of that first plan. And listen, for me is, I think CMOs sometimes we're so afraid of committing to something because the conditions changed that we end up getting trapped on, when you have no plan, you don't know how to adapt where the conditions changed. So you end up it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy of constant reaction and adaptation to whatever is the thing of the moment. And if you don't know where you're going, then you don't know where you need to change. So I always say to the team, get your plan. Listen, as long as, if we go like this, it doesn't matter. As long as we know that we're going in a semi-straight line and that we know where we're going. And then the accountability is critical. Just so you know, I'm going to share this with you because I think is relevant. I meet with Hans every 2 weeks, and my meeting with Hans starts with 2 pages, which is, one is my scorecard, and the second one is my critical focus areas. And for that discussion on the critical focus areas, we have this little game going on, which is how many of my critical focus areas hit his list of the critical focus areas. And every meeting, at the end of the meeting, we joke about if I hit it or not, how far I am. And I tell you, more times than not, our list is 95% aligned. And I'm saying that not to brag. I'm saying our process has gotten, in the time that we've been working together, that process has helped us get to a point that I'm not guessing. I don't guess what is important to him. He's not guessing that I'm like, what is Diego doing? What the hell is he doing? So my point is eliminating the guessing, both in terms of the outcomes that we create in marketing, but then the alignment with the business is so important. And then indulge me with this because I want to complete the thought, which is, okay, you're a great CMO, you know what you're doing, you have your plan, you have your priorities, you have the support and alignment with the CEO. We're not done. And let me tell you what I mean, what not done for that. The rest of the business leaders, either the other functional areas or the business unit presidents, in our case, but every company is kind of like similar on that, are critical for our success. So I always say the same thing. I have a few bosses at Verizon, and I mean that in not, I report to the CEO, but I am accountable to not only the business units presidents or CEOs of our business groups. I'm accountable to the other functional areas, being our head of HR when I talk about employee communications and our employer brand, the CFO. I mean, we are accountable to each other. And I know that it's a lot when you start piling up all of these areas that you need to cover, but without that, you won't make it. You won't make it. So I hear so many CMOs that talk about like, well, listen, I report to the CEO, so I listen to what he tells me. The rest is not my problem. It's not going to be a good outcome, and it doesn't create the right culture. I use this thing that says, and I use it a lot because it is so important to me, which is I am because we are. And that means that what makes me successful, what creates value to me and who I am and my team, is the responsibility that we have to each other as part of the marketing team, but also with the rest of the teams in the company. And that means we're accountable to each other. We carry each other when things don't go well, when it's needed, and that we're all in this together. So that line, I read the lines like, I am because we are. And that I think is a great learning. Maybe that's connected to my purpose as well in terms of bringing people and connecting together. But it's so important, I think.
Well, it's so interesting to hear you talk about that. Two things come to mind, and it's actually one of them is in our program, Diego, and you're mentioned. McKinsey brought out a report. Not everything they say about marketing I agree with, but they brought out a great report at the beginning of last year, which showed that there was a direct correlation between the number of effective relationships that the CMO has with the heads of other disciplines and their tenure. And I couple that, and in the program I mentioned this, that an observer of you after a year and a half at Verizon said, Diego has extremely good tableside manners, bedside manners. He is so able to sit with leaders of other disciplines and work with them. The way you just described it is, of course, the epitome of that. But you come in, and I really would like to operationalize this, because so many CMOs come into new organizations, and you did the extreme. There wasn't a marketing organization except in the divisions. How have you built that relationship with the other functions? And how also have you talked about the role of marketing versus you talked about all your stakeholders, but there are people that lead disciplines responsible for HR, responsible for customers. So how have you managed the space of marketing, and how have you built those relationships?
Well, listen, I'm going to say some of the things that are obvious, and some things that maybe are not as obvious. The point about the relationships, in my mind, is never just about the relationship. I mean, you can have really great relationships with a lot of people and great, table manners, like you said, but be extremely ineffective.
Yeah.
And I think that's important, because I think the relationship piece opens the door to, listen, I want to start, if I don't start by listening, by collaborating, but at the end of the day, it's about outcomes. It's about the outcomes that you drive for the businesses when we have to help them drive demand to create the demand to support their business objectives and our business objectives and outcomes. So my approach, and again, this is I don't know if I read it somewhere, I don't know, but it's always been about, it's interesting because it connects with what I was saying before in terms of COVID. My approach has always been about show me, don't tell me. I'm like that as a person, and I'm like that as a professional as well. It's not like my work speaks for myself, but and this connects to your question about at the beginning. At the beginning, I came with one thing in mind, which is like, I have to drive outcomes that will inform two things. One, this team is accountable with us, so we like them, so we want them, we want their help, so they're not just talkers, But second, that's what educates. You can apply to anything, but as it relates to a marketing organization in a company that marketing maybe is not as established, it's not going to help to bring a deck that talks about, in theory, about what marketing can do for the company. But if I talk to you about, let me tell you the 3 initiatives that we have going on right now that are driving what marketing can do for the company. We're doing this, we're doing this, we're doing this. Now look at the results, what this created. And I don't know if it was by design or by default, and I haven't been able in the 6 years to establish total causality of this point. But I was convinced that I needed to move really fast in the areas that will create outcomes that the organization would value and would say, oh wow, this is what the team can do. Let's do more. But at the same time, in other areas, move without cutting corners in terms of building the marketing capability, getting the right people in place. We had to bring a lot of new skill sets that we didn't have. I think sometimes what happens, my observation talking to a lot of leaders or CMOs in general, is that people create the first part of their plan is to create the capability. Let's build a plane, and either they spend so much time doing that the plane never flies. So before the plane even takes off, they're out, or they are flying a plane that is just falling apart constantly. So they never really create the foundation. So I know that this might sound like the biggest understatement in the world, or the most obvious thing in the world, but yeah, we are coming into organizations that are complex, with a level that is higher or lower of the understanding of what marketing can do. To your point, So you have to build a plane while you're flying the plane, while you're making sure that people understand how to operate with this plane, and making sure that people get the outcomes. It's like it's a lot. But I do believe that is the difference between, forget about CMOs. I think between great leaders and not so great leaders, because that's where you really make an impact in an organization. I don't know. That's my. I don't want to sound like I have everything figured out, because again, I've been some of these things have been instinctual. Some of the things have been like also being at the right place at the right time with the right support. So
but I'm asking you because I'm noticing the effectiveness and the tenure, and you're saying it. If I were to paraphrase, what I'm hearing you talk about is balancing the urgent and the very important, which perhaps isn't urgent, but after a year you notice it's not there, and after 2 years you've got a capability which you then can propel on. I want to pivot the conversation, recognizing the time and also the questions that people shot my way, Diego, which is that you've actually in the last 2-3 years more and more publicly become a public leader for diversity in the marketing industry and the advertising industry. And obviously the times have overtaken us. All credit to you that you were an advocate and an action leader before it became popular to be that. But can you take me on that journey and tell me very specifically what you're doing and what some of the things that people are listening could be doing to drive diversity in this ecosystem of ours?
Yeah. Well, obviously for me, this since very early on was a very personal issue, because I come from Argentina. I always I didn't really understood until I came here what lack of diversity looked like, because I grew up with a lot of diversity. So to me was in a way very shocking and very vivid to see the difference, because it was something that it never occurred to me that it could be a lack of, because that's the way it was when I was growing up, and even when I started working in Argentina. So it became something really, really important, because I felt like a lot of people weren't just getting the opportunities for whatever reason was, their background, their upbringing, the color of their skin, their accent. So you see, my accent since the last time we spoke has gotten almost disappeared. So that became a really important thing. And then what it was interesting is that there wasn't really either a playbook or the guidance for where do you start. So my advice to people when they ask me this question, I always say, first of all, this is a very complex issue, meaning there's no one silver bullet. So what we did, and what I did is, well, you need to start somewhere, and for every company that might be a different journey, but we have to address the issues of the whole ecosystem. That is for sure, because this thing is not just representation. It's in a lot of other areas as well. But you have to start somewhere. And the worst thing is when people are trying to wait to have everything figured out to start moving in any direction. And I say to everybody that is listening, to everybody that might be listening later on, is like, start where you can add value to start taking the first step and start moving in the same direction. For us, we started with representation. That was a big issue. I mean, you remember I sent that letter this was now like almost 5 years ago, to our agencies to say, I want to know what are the numbers of your diversity in your teams that run Verizon and the agency as a whole, and we'll share ours. Of course, the numbers that would go back were appalling. So that became a really forcing mechanism that it started to move things like, for example, now we have a council with the CEOs of all of our agencies that we meet every quarter. Everybody shares their progress and numbers with each other. So again, to the point about collaboration, they're not only accountable to me, but they're accountable to each other. And that led to Ad Fellows, and we created a program that I think is I'm so proud of that work, because it's one of those programs that really has become a galvanizing I think method, I would say, for how to do this right. Ad Fellows gets young professionals that are all diverse in a series of rotations during 8 months, so they can go through brand agencies, media, digital, etc. They're all coming from diverse backgrounds from outside of the kind of like New York or LA areas, and then we guarantee 90% of employment. And because we hire very well into the internship program, we end up with great professionals. But then, so that was an example. And then we said, listen, we need to go further. We can't just look at representation. So we talked about then internally how the equity piece and the inclusion becomes. Then as we bring people with diversity, how do they want to stay working at Verizon or our agencies? We went further and we say, okay, how is our creative supply chain looks like in terms of what we put in our money? And we realized that, yeah, we're not hiring a lot of directors that are diverse. We're not hiring a lot of photographers that are diverse. We're not hiring a lot of production companies that are diversity owned. So we started to go into that area. Then we said, okay, let's look at the content that we produce. Is the content representing not only how America looks like, but also eliminating any kind of stereotypes? And then we brought, we have partners with, See Her, that has been a great resource for that. We created our own measure of diversity in our content to see how we make progress on that. And then the fourth area, which we just launched, which is now we have a very stringent set of guidelines and requirements around the partners that we work with on the media, creative, and basically where we put our money. That if they don't really agree with this sort of principles, guidelines, and directions in terms of how they deal with diversity and inclusion issues or other hate speech and stuff like that, we simply don't advertise. We're not going to advertise. We're not going to put our money with them. And now it's black and white. So I always try to make it about policy. And that's been one of the things that I always get asked is about like, well, why are you still out of Facebook, when the boycott stopped, and I said, well, because for us, it was never about a boycott. For us was you put this content next to our advertising, which is something that in our guidelines is not authorized. So until you can fix that, and we will work with you to fix it, we are not going to advertise. So it's not an issue. It's an issue of policy, and being consistent with the policy. But my point of these 4 areas that I described is that now we have this thing called responsible marketing action plan, which is what we're doing in these 4 areas. We have measures to track. We have teams that I tell you, I gotta thank my team and the teams that are working on this, because without their passion, I'm always just the voice that talks about these issues, but they are the ones that are really making all this work. And if anything, to the point about connection, we have brought a lot of coalitions. I'm not trying to reinvent the wheel just to brand the Verizon. If we do some things that others can take, like iFellows is something that anybody can access. All of the IP is available for anybody to take. So if you're interested, give me a call, anybody. And then we participated in other coalitions, like, with Mark Pritchard, with Lorraine Tuhill we are kind of like this group of CMOs that, listen, we're learning from each other. We're creating partnerships with each other. And that's also critical for this, that not all of us think that by doing our own little thing, are we going to create the big change that is required. And listen, to the point that we started when you asked me about my tenure at Verizon, this is another good example of that. You know what? Let's stop talking about what it should be. Let's start doing. And that happens on anything. You start doing, and more things happen, and you get that momentum. And I think we're in a very special time now in which there's enough momentum and importance for this issue that the work is going to accelerate. But it's going to take a lot of effort as well, because I still, Antonio Lucio, that you know very well, and I have been always, every time that we talk, it's like we're tired of talking about this, in the sense of like, that we're not tired of doing, but we're tired of like the talk, So are you still there? I think
I am totally
there. You are.
Yes.
Okay.
No. So you mentioned a lot of names of people that we are either have talked to, and Antonio, as you know, runs the Diversity for Growth initiative within the Institute. Lorraine Tuhill and Mark Pritchard are both future guests on these series. But I think what's really important, if I can decode your journey here, is obviously if there's one theme that comes across every time, it's do it and learn from that rather than figure it out and probably not even take off. But there's also a whole hierarchy here about first, your own team, two, the bench. And I think Ad Fellows, a lot of people will have heard the name, but not know enough about it. I would really encourage people to do their research and then indeed reach out to us or to Diego. Will connect you to learn and apply that to your industry, because this is, you're creating ecosystems of talent, aren't you? And you're heavying up the balance towards equity and diversity. And then actually following the spend. Who are we working with to create the content, to place it, to produce it, and then what are we actually communicating? Lorraine Tuhail of Google talks a lot about auditing the content for diversity and for messages that are either implicit or explicit through the content. Diego, I hope people do pick that up. It's inspiring to hear your journey there, and I think there are some big themes, and I think ultimately it does keep coming back to that word for you: connections.
Yeah, and listen, I've been very fortunate in my career, very fortunate in my career, in my personal life. I know that you create a lot of what you are able to do and achieve in your life. But first of all, you cannot do anything with the support of so many people that in small or in big ways have been able to help you get there. And I feel a huge responsibility to it's not just what you hear about, like giving back because what I got, but it's a huge responsibility because of the position that I'm in. I work in one of the most amazing brands, the most incredible companies in the world, a very successful and resourceful company. So our responsibility is enormous as a company because who we are and what we're able to do. But my responsibility is enormous in that context. And so I tell you, I drive myself crazy because I sometimes I'm on my team crazy, probably they would say, because I don't think we can do enough. We need to be focused, but our time here is limited. So we're gonna make it count. I mean, we all need to make it count.
Oh, thank you, Diego. And I think there's a lot of vision and passion coming from this conversation, but there's also actually very practical stepping stones that people listening to this can pick up and follow. I want to end with a question that is about the people that we're talking to, the people that these growth leaders, CMOs and other growth leaders are listening to and learning from. And it's become a tradition in these conversations that we ask the people we speak to who you think you'd like to hear from, who you think this audience needs to learn from. And so my question to you is, who should be next?
Well, I don't know if this would be like super obvious answer or the answer that you would expect, but I think somebody that you should invite is Lisa Sherman. I don't know if you know Lisa. Lisa is the CEO of the Ad Council.
Ah, yes.
And first of all, she's an extraordinary human being, but I think it takes and I've been trying to learn from her a lot, because it takes a different kind of leadership to be able to do a very business-like CEO or leader of a nonprofit organization that is to work with a lot of like very business-like people and create the right outcomes as you were running a company, but you're really running a nonprofit. It's a little bit of the different thing. You can't just put anybody there. And she's somebody that I admired tremendously, and especially now during this work that we've been doing together for vaccine hesitancy. She took this as like, this is a one in a lifetime opportunity for the Ad Council to really do maybe our biggest campaign, biggest impact yet. She took it very, very seriously, and she put the biggest coalition of business leaders, CEOs, companies to create something really, really incredible. So I'm very grateful to her, very impressed by what she's done. and also privileged. I feel privileged that I was able to be part of it with her. So I think it will be an interesting, great growth conversation in an interesting angle for that.
Sounds like it's particularly interesting also for the leaders of the Institute for Real Growth to learn from. So I appreciate that recommendation, Diego. So much going on, and incredible to actually sort of reconnect after a number of years and hear what you've accomplished. People listening in regularly know that I don't just throw compliments around, but it's really true to say from the heart that I've seen you come into an organization that wasn't very marketing oriented, wasn't very brand oriented, was incredibly, you've described the organization better than I could. And now it sounds like everything's intertwined, it's purpose led, and it's business policy. It's not marketing pushing something. All credit to you on that. And thank you so much for taking the time today. Diego Scotti, thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you for having me. It's been an honor being here, and also a privilege to have been able to learn from you in the last few years. So thank you to you and your team. Thank you.
Thank you, Diego. Everyone, I'd like to just announce that immediately after this, we're inviting you to the new innovation from IRG, the CMO Cafe, which is unscripted, but where you can join and you can ask questions and you can throw topics that this discussion provoked or other topics that are high on your agenda into the discussion. And no one is forcing the answers. It's just collaboration and learning from each other. And otherwise, please join us in 2 weeks with Lorraine Toohill or Mark Pritchard 2 weeks later, or the CEOs of PepsiCo and Shell, talking about how sustainability strategy is permeating throughout a massive organization that used to be focused on the natural resources of the earth and is transitioning. Lots to learn, lots to connect around. Diego Scotti and everyone, thank you. Bye-bye.